is all about the relationships that we make, the connections that we have with each other, the people that we touch, those who I believe are acting as God's hands in our lives. And the first thing we're going to do, we got several lessons here. One from the early church, listening up the ministry of the Apostle Paul and his journey. And then also our traveling United Methodist Pastor Thomas, represented by this bike here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hear from Paul and his journey found in the book of Acts.
Acts 20:25 through 38. I have gone about among all of you, preaching the kingdom of God. And now I know that none of you will ever see me again. So I solemnly declare to you this very day, if any of you should be lost, I am not responsible. For I have not held back from announcing to you the whole purpose of God. So keep watch over yourselves and over all the flock which the Holy Spirit has placed in your care. Be shepherds of the church of God, which he made his own through the blood of his Son. I know that after I leave, fierce wolves will come among you, and they will not spare the flock. The time will come when some men from your own group will tell lies to lead the believers away after them. Watch then, and remember that with many tears day and night I taught every one of you for 3 years. And now I commend you to the care of God and to the message of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you the blessings of God has for all of his people. I have not wanted anyone's silver or gold or clothing. You yourselves know that I have worked with these hands of mine to provide everything that my companions and I have needed. I have shown you in all things that by working hard in this way, we must help the weak, remembering the words that the Lord Jesus himself said, there is more happiness in giving than in receiving. When Paul finished, he knelt down with them and prayed. They were all crying as they hugged him and kissed him goodbye. They were especially sad because he had said they would never see him again, and so they went with him to the ship.
Fascinating text. It truly testifies to the power we have in the encounters we make with each other. Let me give you a little background here. Paul is on his way to Jerusalem. He wants to get there in time for the celebration of Pentecost. But as he is going there, he keeps getting these messages from people throughout the region to come and visit him. People are needing his encouragement. They're seeking his wisdom. They've heard about his teachings. They certainly know about his reputation. He is an established church planter and builder, and he made some great things happen in Ephesus and Corinth. And wherever he goes, he just provides this God-given guidance. But more importantly, he touches the people that I believe that God touches us. On the night that I heard Tony Campolo speak, I was at a youth convention. And the story that Tony tells that I'm about to share with you hit home with the group that I was sitting with. I was there with a bunch of youth from Philadelphia. And they all knew the gentleman that Tony was talking about. As Tony tells it, he was dressed in a business suit. He was going to a meeting, and he was walking down Chestnut Street in Philadelphia. And he encounters, and this is Tony's words, a bum. And this bum is drinking a cup of coffee. And this cup of coffee is so good that he's just got to share it with Tony. Well, Tony does not want to drink this bum's cup of coffee. But the guy is insistent, so he takes a sip of coffee. And then the bum wants to give Tony a hug. Now, Tony Campolo, if you know his ministry, loves to work with the homeless. But he, as Tony tells it, he would rather give this guy money than be on the receiving end of a hug. But then he remembers the words of Jesus. whatever you do to another, you do also to me. And in that, Tony realizes that by hugging this bum, this homeless man, this child of God, he was actually hugging Jesus. What a way to touch God. Now, I want to do something a little bit different here. I want everyone to look at your neighbor, and I want you to think of a big water bottle or something that had to do with water. You see, the person next to you is made up of 2/3 water. This is us. Now, look at your neighbor and imagine a big vat of water, but don't drink your neighbor, okay? Don't want you to do that. But our bodies are made up of, get this, 2/3 water, 18% carbon, and a few other elements. So that means that 90% of our body is this, water, and represented by this carbon paper here. This is us. Now, do you realize what I just did? I made you think of the person sitting next to you not as your neighbor, not as your spouse, not as your friend or a colleague or a pew mate. I just made you think of them as water and carbon. Just elements on the periodic table. Kind of makes you think differently of Minnie and Bev and Bonnie and some of the other people that you have sitting around. Okay, enough of that. Let me share with you one of my favorite stories. There is a monastery that's high up in the mountains. And the monastery had fallen on some pretty bad times. The monks that had lived there were getting up there in age, and no one was joining them, let alone coming to see their beautiful grounds. So in desperation, they're seeking the advice of a hermit that lives nearby. Now the hermit lived down the pathways and lived in kind of a cave-like dwelling. He was a bit strange, but he always had good things to say. So they go in and they're visiting with the hermit and they're talking about their plight, about how they're all getting up in age and after a generation there's not going to be a monastery there and they're just dying. It's just bad, it's bad. And the whole time the hermit is just saying to them, one of you is a messenger of God. The hermit doesn't say, well, you need to have better sermons or better advertising or have you embrace technology. No, the hermit just continues to say, one of you is a messenger of God. Well, as you might imagine, these monks are not happy. He doesn't give any kind of suggestions. And so they begin to walk back up the long path up to the monastery. But as they're walking along, one of the monks begins to think to himself about those words from the hermit. One of you is actually a messenger from God. Let me share with you his inner monologue. One of us is a messenger of God. Did he actually mean one of us monks here at the monastery? That's impossible. We are all too old. We are too insignificant. On the other hand, what if it's true? And if it's true, then which one of us is it? Do you suppose he meant the abbot? Oh, yes, he meant the abbot. That abbot has been our leader for a generation. If it was anybody, it's got to be the abbot. On the other hand, he might have meant Brother Thomas. Brother Thomas is a holy man, a man of wisdom and light. I bet he meant Brother Thomas. He did not mean Brother Eldred. Brother Eldred gets crotchety at times, and it's difficult to reason with. On the other hand, Brother Eldred is always right. Maybe the hermit did mean Brother Eldred. But he surely didn't mean Brother Philip. Philip is so passive, so shy, a real nobody. Still, he's always there when you need him. He's loyal and trustworthy. Yes, I bet he meant Philip. Of course, the hermit didn't mean me. He couldn't possibly have meant me. I'm just an ordinary person. Suppose he did. Suppose I am a messenger of God. Oh God, not me. I couldn't be that much for you. Or could I? Well, as these monks walked back up to the monastery, it seems that each monk was actually playing this inner monologue in their head. And when they got back to the grounds, these old monks begin to treat each other with extraordinary respect on the off chance that one of them was actually the messenger from God. And on the off chance that they themselves were the messenger from God. Now, as the story goes, it changed everything. People started returning to the monastery, not necessarily to be monks, but just to return because these people were treating each other with extraordinary respect. People just wanted to be around them. And a few did join their order. Now, think about that for a moment. If we all treated each other as if our neighbor, our colleague, our friend, our family member was sent here directly from God, do you think that would change everything? They're not a bottle of water or carbon paper. They are sent by God. Let's take a look at our blog entry. I was scurrying through a short-lived traffic light when I saw a speeding line zip across the road. What the heck was that? It had passed so quickly I hadn't got a good take on what I had seen. Then we saw each other about the same time and made a quick rendezvous at the corner of the busy intersection. The line was a Walmart steal at $11 that covered Tommy Yarborough's upper torso, a 74-year-old kid on a traditional bike that he had dismantled and then rebuilt as a recumbent. So we talked for a while, he cluing me in on how to get through Lubbock and live to tell about it. Tommy is a serious, no-nonsense kind of guy. If he'd been a school teacher, you sure wouldn't have wanted to get caught whispering. He had a hard life. You could read it in his face. Things had begun to brighten for him once he hit retirement. Didn't have to play rough sergeant anymore. Just didn't matter anymore if someone was whispering. Tommy was a bicyclist. That's what he did most days. He looked my bike over carefully, noting the disc brakes and the aluminum handlebars and the sprocket sizes. So we became recumbent friends right then and there, then parted company so I could continue the journey. Bill is a born and raised cowboy from Tallulah, Texas. Met him on the only station on Route 87 headed for La Mesa. So this kid, let me pause here. This is where Lubbock is, and La Mesa is down here. Nice guy, huge Texan drawl, and big heart. I'd asked him if there was a cafe nearby, and that got a fun conversation started. He registered, "Woo, oh boy!" Astonishment when he caught in our exchange that I had pedaled from Montana to Tallulah, his point of reference. He wished me luck and pointed me yonder to the Blue Top Cafe. Meanwhile, at the Blue Top Cafe, several diners initiated a conversation with me about the tour. I sat with this guy, his wife, and his parents. These are Baptist true bloods, love salvation, revivals, and Bible preaching. As soon as I started to leave, the son walked over and gave me $20 toward Hope Mission. At the Blue Top, I met mother-daughter sweethearts and employees at the cafe. Mother cooks great grilled cheese sandwiches, though a bit heavy on the grease, and her daughter's a server. Both of them had never seen a recumbent, so they asked if I would come out and take a picture of them standing beside it. I clicked their camera, and they clicked mine. Next was the most talkative guy on the tour. I hardly had time to eat my egg sandwich between nodding in the affirmative or listening in rapt attention to something he was mouthing with passion. Too much passion at 7:30 a.m. between bites of egg sandwich and slurps of coffee is not always a good thing. I think he had recumbent lust. He constantly reminded me how he would like a bike like that. So I locked the bike in the room that night, just in case our friendliness provided a reason to borrow the bike I never had. Somewhere near Abernathy, which is up here, Texas, I met Matt and Carol. A junkyard horseshoed around their yard, and flooding had turned the front of their home and yard into a mini Lake Tahoe. Friendly folks who weren't afraid to show affection for each other or God. They kindly pointed me toward the right road. Bacta is an East Indian who, along with his wife Ruby, had purchased a local motel in Canyon, Texas. That's right up here. The motel was run down and left in a sort of eclectic, piecemeal squalor decor. But as I was unpacking my bike, I heard someone just singing away in abandon. Another bike rider who had topped 100 miles a day? Turns out it was Bacta, having a great time peeling ginger roots. Is that stuff intoxicating? So we got into some conversation and enjoyed the afternoon. These are two of the greatest faces of Texas, horses that represent the beautiful nation of equines that fill Texas with grace and beauty. These two were curious and came up for a look-see. "Hey, Ed, get a load of that horse." "You dummy flicka, that's one of them sit-down bikes." "Oh yeah, but what a skinny dude riding it." This is Thomas Hall, our traveling United Methodist pastor from Montana, who we've been talking about, rode one summer all the way down to Texas. I've been preaching on this, and we've been listening in on his blog entry, something that we're calling today the Final Mile. Now, you probably have noticed that each blog contains a theme. He has talked about hospitality, or trusting the Spirit, or danger, or landscape. But today, his blog entry just seems random. In fact, he's kind of all over the map here in Texas. In fact, those that made the map for me couldn't quite figure out why some of these places are all over the place, or not in line. But when you read his blog entry again, you realize that he's done something here. Thomas tells us about the people that he met. And there's no depth, but he treats each one as if they were a gift from God. No, not hindrances to his goal. Not people annoying him. Well, the talkative guy came close. They were people sent by God to touch him. And I believe that Thomas returned the favor. I can tell you that he did that with me and my family. He came in, we visited for a while, he helped us out in the garden. We had a great time, and then bam, he was gone. Just a lot like the Apostle Paul. He came in, shared what God was all about, and then bam, he was gone. Just think about the legacy that he left. Brief visits throughout the Roman countryside. He stayed just long enough to nurture a struggling church. Just enough to get that church to believe in itself. Enough to see that each person around them was indeed a gift from God. You know, I think here in Gearing we can relate. We have these connections that are brief. We get to know these kids that live in our neighborhood, and then they graduate and they're gone. Or we get to know a coworker, and the next thing we know, we come to work and they've taken another job. Or maybe we get to know a neighbor, and we come home from work and we see the for sale sign. You know, in each instance, I believe they were sent by God to touch us. And you know what that means. I believe that we are sent by God to reach out to another. For when we believe this, it changes everything. When we treat each other as if we have been sent by God, we are nurtured. And when we nurture God's people in incredible ways. I've invited a special speaker to come up and talk about what it is like to reach out and to touch people in our community. So Chris is going to talk about his experience with the teammates mentoring.
Good morning. So earlier this week, Seth asked me if I would answer a couple questions that he posed to me because he knew that I was participated in the local teammates chapter of an organization called Teammates. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of background on Teammates in case you're not familiar with it. Teammates, and this is from their website. I need to cite my source. Teammates mentoring program began in 1991 with the vision of University of Nebraska head football coach Tom Osborne and his wife Nancy. Coach Osborne felt that the athletes in his program could make an impact on the middle school students, and 22 football players began meeting with middle school students in the Lincoln Public Schools. Of the 22 original mentees, 21 went on to graduate from high school, while one left school early to pursue a successful motocross career. 18 of the original mentees also obtained some form of post-secondary education. The Teammates Mentoring Program was formalized as a statewide program in 1998, with 12 chapters and 440 mentor-mentee matches. Since then, Teammates has steadily grown to include over 150 chapters and currently serves more than 8,400 youth through partnerships with local school districts. Teammates now has chapters throughout Nebraska, Iowa, and recently opened its first chapters in Kansas and Wyoming. I worked with my mentee for 6 years, which started with him in 7th grade through his high school graduation. So the first question that Seth posed to me was why I became a mentor for Teammates. The first reason, it was not hard to be energetic and enthusiastic when asked by our local Teammates coordinator, Maury Dinas, who's actually here this morning, to become involved with the local Teammates chapter. It was an inspiring message and vision put forth by Dr. Osborne, a man that I respect as a coach, but more importantly, as a person and the way he lives his life. A great example of a mentor. The second being, I felt that there is a need in our society to help people and try to make the world a better place. Our youth needs strong mentors in their lives. The family unit, as you know, in a lot of cases is broken, and more often than we would like to admit, shattered. The third reason of the 3 that I came up with was I wanted to be involved with our local school. I wanted to somehow pay back some of the great opportunities that my children had through their experiences at Gearing Public Schools and their continued educational opportunities. My parents, who both graduated from high school, stressed to me as a child the need for higher education, whether it be vocational or post-secondary education. Both of my older brothers went to college, influencing my continued education. I felt as a mentor I could be an influence in a young man's life to help him understand the value of education, whether it be graduating from high school, choosing a path to higher education, or just showing him I would be someone he could depend on, showing up consistently and being a role model for his life. The second question that Seth asked me to talk about was why the relationship was important to me. I was able to develop a relationship of trust with my mentee, a young man trying to be a parent, son, and brother to 3 younger siblings all at once. He came from a broken home and not only was dealing with the normal teenage challenges, but also dealing with very adult situations, and situations sometimes unimaginable for me at his age, yet him being mature enough to handle a majority of these situations. My mentee was a mentor himself. He was a mentor to his 2 sisters and little brother. The relationship was important because I feel it made me a better listener. Situations would come up with my mentee that I had no control over. I was able to mentor him as a friend and trusted confidant rather than a parent. I was never able to completely let go of the worry I had for my mentee, but had to have faith and trust that all things were possible. I know that many of us have or have had mentors in our lives. Many when I was growing up, and many as an adult. I've had mentors in this church, some that have come and gone. People that influence our lives, they are important. They show us how to live, and more importantly, how to be better people. My mentee enriched my life. I learned from him just as much as I hope he learned from me. I tried to show him what a stable relationship with a family looked like, so he could someday give his family that same stability. My mentee was a very solid student and always recognized that the way out of his situation was education. Education was not a tough sell for me to him. He was very driven and a very good student. There were many times he would be too critical of himself for a grade he received on a test. And I would say to him, it's okay to get a 98% on an exam. His home situation was the toughest of his struggles. If he went on to higher education, he would be the first of his family to do so. I talked to him about scholarship programs and ways he could get to where he wanted to go. I introduced him to different business leaders in the community and tried to expose him to things that would help him. I tried to be an adult that he could lean on, he could talk to, and get advice from that was helpful for him to reach his goals. Most of all, I was just someone he could count on to show up. We would meet at the school or go to have lunch once a week over his lunch hour and stayed in contact over the summers. The importance of the relationship for me is I believe I made a difference in this young man's life. His future looks very bright from where I stand. He has already completed 2 years of education at WNCC and plans on continuing his education at the University of Nebraska, majoring in chemistry, and is planning to pursue a chemical engineering degree. Through all of the adversity that he has faced, the times that he could have quit, he continues on, and he's an inspiration to me.
Thank you, Chris. I want to end with one of my favorite poems. It's one that I probably already shared with you already, but it is, I think, a special one to listen to again. It is called When You Thought I Wasn't Looking. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw you hang my first picture in the refrigerator, and I wanted to paint another one. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw you feed a stray cat, and I thought it was good to be kind to animals. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw you make my favorite cake for me, and I knew that little things are special things. When you thought I wasn't looking, I heard you say a prayer, and I believed there was a God that I could always talk to. When you thought I wasn't looking, I felt you kiss me goodnight, and I felt loved. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw tears come from your eyes, and I learned that sometimes things hurt, but it's all right to cry. When you thought I wasn't looking, I saw that you cared, and I wanted to be everything that I could be. When you thought I wasn't looking, I looked, and now I want to say thanks for all the things I saw when you thought I wasn't looking. Amen. I'm going to ask the ushers to wait upon us as we give back to God.